In this unit, I'd like to talk with you about payments in Shopware 6 and what all of that actually means. Basically, we're always dealing with the context of e-commerce here. That means payment methods always refer to specific methods, and in Shopware 6, we also work with a specific status that is associated with them. We saw that when we had the unit about the order overview because, yes, each payment can, for example, still be open, partially paid, or already fully paid, and so on. Right, we already looked at that in a bit more detail. Now let's take a look at how we can, for example, add new payment methods or edit existing ones. To do this, we first go to the settings and then to the payment methods. In the overview here, we first see, yes, the payment types from our PayPal extension. I installed those when I set up the instance, and I can also, for example, deactivate individual payment types here using the toggle. The same applies below for the payment methods from our standard setup, such as invoice, cash on delivery, and so on. I can also simply either edit or deactivate them here. Now we want to add a new payment method. I'll call it pay later. I'll do the same for the technical name. This is used internally by Shopware 6, yes, to manage the payment method. We can also specify a position. For example, I could enter 10 here, and then in the dropdown on the front end, the payment method will always appear at position 10, right? It's kind of like a ranking. Here I also have the option, yes, to display a logo and description. For example, I could write here that the payment method is only available from $500 and can be paid after 30 days to make it easier to recognize later. Below that, I can then activate it and I can specify whether the payment method can still be changed during checkout or not. I'll leave that out for now. And then next I can define an availability rule and we'll do that right away. But first, let's save the payment method. Let's create a new availability rule for this payment method. And for that, we can go back to the settings. Here we'll find all the settings and also the rule builder where we can create new rules. We can now click on create rule here and I could then say, okay, new rule for a new rule, and I would now choose priority 1 here. This allows you to more or less prioritize different rules in sequence. We can now add a description here. I'll leave all of that out for now because it's relatively unimportant and only meant for internal reference. And now I can choose what kind of rule this should be. And in our case, it's about payment, of course, so we'll select payment. In the same way, we can also add text here to label the payment method with some description later on. At the bottom, we can then select the conditions. For example, I could say here that it's always valid, that it applies to certain customer groups, and so on. In our case, I now want the shopping cart, that is the total value of it, to be greater than 500. And then this rule should apply and the payment method should be available. I could now also add further subconditions or use the AND logic to query two things at the same time. We could go ahead and do that right now at this moment. For example, I could mention that it should not only be available for a cart value over 500, but we could also, for instance, say that the payment method should only be available if the shipping address is in a specific country. For example, we can now say it's a one-off, and then we could, for instance, select the United States of America here in particular. But we could also add Germany as well and so on. However, we can also easily reverse the whole thing using the operator by saying, for example, none of, and then we would exclude those two countries. If I'm satisfied with that, I can save everything and right, then it gets added and we can go back to our payment methods in the settings. Here we then select our pay later method that we created earlier, go into it, and now we will also have the new rule available here and we can save everything. Now the payment method would only be available if the conditions defined in the rule are actually met. And that's basically it for the essentials regarding payment methods in Shopware 6. I would definitely recommend that at the end of this unit, you go ahead and create your own various payment methods and also take a look at what different options you have with the rule builder to use conditions to either exclude or add more payment methods. Try it out a bit in the front end as well and just get a bit more familiar with the whole topic.